On May the 6th, 2023, Charles III will be crowned King of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland and 14 other sovereign states. He will also become the head of the 56-state Commonwealth of Nations and the secular head of the Anglican Church of England. Charles III is already 74 years old. In the history of Great Britain, there has been no king older at the time of his coronation. Countless TV stations from all over the world are covering this ceremony. While the cameras of the mass media are focused on the splendour and pomp of this event, this documentary aims to open a 5-part file that shows a very different face of King Charles III, one that is largely kept quiet by the mass media. This documentary brings to light a shocking background.
Let's look at King Charles III and his possessions.
As heir to the throne of Queen Elizabeth II, King Charles III inherits a gigantic fortune. Normally, he would have to pay inheritance tax like any other Briton. However, Charles is exempt from inheritance tax under a 1993 agreement with John Major's government. Here is a brief overview of Charles III's possessions, or rather, his British Empire.
First, land ownership.
Charles has become the largest landowner on earth as a result of his mother's death, with the British Crown owning a registered area of over 2,500 million hectares in Australia, New Zealand, Northern Ireland, Canada, Great Britain and the Falkland Islands. This is more than 1/6 of the entire surface of the earth, or 75 times the area of Germany.
Second, duchies and country estates.
Charles owns the duchies in Lancaster and in Cornwall, which include lands in the most expensive areas of London. Furthermore, he now has at his disposal more than 300 residences, including castles and palaces such as Buckingham Palace, Windsor Castle, Kensington Palace, St. James Palace, Balmoral Castle in Scotland and Sandringham in Norfolk.
Third, the British seabed.
The Crown controls almost all of the seabed and half of the seacoast around the United Kingdom. It is estimated to be worth over $100 billion.
Fourth, the Crown Estate.
The Crown Estate is one of the largest real estate groups in the world. It manages the real estate and land holdings of the royal family and each year transfers 25% of its profits directly to the monarch's coffers. In 2020 alone, the company made a profit of 420 million euros. The royal family received about 100 million euros of that.
Fifth, precious stones.
The British Crown owns the world's largest collection of jewels. The crown jewels consist of more than 140 pieces, but the entire collection consists of 23,578 precious stones, including Cullinan 1, the largest cut diamond in the world with an estimated value of about 440 million euros, and the Koh-i-Noor diamond, estimated value of at least 1 billion euros.
In order not to have to disclose her immense private fortune, but to be able to continue to hide it from the public, the Queen had prevailed with the government that a planned bill was amended accordingly. This was reported by the Sun newspaper in February 2021, citing documents discovered by The Guardian. A look at the history of the British Empire casts a very dark shadow on this gigantic wealth of King Charles III, which his royal ancestors have stolen many times by force with bloodshed. The Crown's fortune is based largely on the plundering of mineral resources of poor countries of origin.
Charles III's ancestors were deeply involved in the slave trade in the 17th and 18th centuries. A document from the year 1689, for example, shows that shares in the Royal African Company, which was involved in the slave trade, was transferred to King William III. As a result, the British aristocracy unscrupulously profited from slavery through the stock market. According to calculations of historian David Richardson, British ships transported at least 3.4 million captured Africans to America.
Against the background of this criminally acquired wealth, the pompous coronation of King Charles III seems like a slap in the face of every normal citizen who has to earn his daily bread with work and diligence.
Now let's take a look at King Charles III and the manifold entanglements of the royal family.
First, the WEF entanglements of Charles III.
Various commentators report that the project Great Reset was not originally launched by Klaus Schwab, but rather by the current King Charles III. Indeed, it was Charles who officially launched the project on June 3, 2020, with a tweet, #The Great Reset, and became the official patron. Was Klaus Schwab only the recipient of orders from King Charles III? This is also indicated by Charles' visit to the World Economic Forum in Davos in January 2020. Already there, Charles specifically made his case for part of the Great Reset, climate protection, or the so-called Green Deal.
A report in the Byline Times on October 4, 2021 reveals his actual motives, namely that Charles himself is, in fact, probably the biggest beneficiary of his Green Deal agenda. Since the British Crown owns large parts of the seabed, massive profits end up in the monarch's pockets with every offshore wind farm that is built. Ultimately, this hypocritical climate protection pumps the profits from rising energy costs directly into the pockets of the rich. It is an elaborate money redistribution machine in which the population becomes more and more impoverished.
Second, entanglements with Freemasonry.
The British Crown has been very closely intertwined with Freemasonry for centuries. Already King Edward VII and also King George VI, the father of Elizabeth II, were professed high-level Freemasons. Queen Elizabeth II, Charles' mother, was not only the great patroness of Freemasonry, but she also presided over the Order of the Garter, the governing body of Freemasons around the world. Since 2022, King Charles III has presided over the Order of the Garter.
Now, this order controls the rest of Freemasonry through the Grand Lodges of England and uses them to infiltrate all aspects of society. As a special distinction, the king may also knight deserving civilians and military officers. The British Crown also uses these Knights of the Crown as agents who swear allegiance to the House of Windsor and receive power and wealth in return. Knights of the British Crown include members of the British House of Rothschild, former U.S. President Ronald Reagan, former U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, Bill Gates, former chairman of the FED Alan Greenspan, former mayor of New York Rudy Giuliani, U.S. businessman and politician Michael Bloomberg, and film director Steven Spielberg, along with U.S. Army General Wesley Clark, and last but not least, pedophile and former BBC host Jimmy Savile.
His close ties to wealthy circles of Freemasonry and his leadership role in the Great Reset, which aims to have people own nothing, show that King Charles cannot be looking out for the good of the people.
Let us examine King Charles III and his financial scandals.
Although royal family members are prohibited from accepting cash under rules governing royal donation policy, Charles has been involved in numerous cash affairs.
In June 2022, he accepted a suitcase filled with €1 million from Qatari billionaire and sheikh. He should never have accepted the cash, even though it was allegedly intended for charity. In total, Charles is said to have received €3 million in cash for the Prince of Wales Charity Foundation from controversial Sheikh Hamad bin Jassim bin Jabbar Al Thani, the former Prime Minister of Qatar, between 2011 and 2015. What is bizarre is that some of the money was stashed in shopping bags. The Sheikh was also referred to as the man who bought London. Back in 2013, Charles had accepted a €1 million donation from Osama bin Laden's half-brother against the advice of his advisors. Charles' close confidant, Michael Fawcett, had to resign as chief executive of his Prince Foundation after a Money for Honors scandal. After donating money, Fawcett promised to help a Saudi businessman obtain both British citizenship and a knighthood.
These examples demonstrably show how carelessly Charles handles cash donations. Clearly, he is not trustworthy.
Now let's look at King Charles III and the mysterious death of Diana.
First, the premonitions of Princess Diana.
On August 28, 1996, Charles and Diana were officially divorced. Approximately 1 year later, on August 31, 1997, Diana died as a result of a tragic accident in Paris. Very remarkable the statements of Diana in which she said, "If something happens to me, you can be sure that Prince Philip, with the help of the Secret Service, is the culprit." 10 months before her death, Diana delivers a handwritten letter to her butler, Paul Burrell. Published by the Daily Mirror in 2003, she wrote, "This particular phase in my life is the most dangerous. My husband is planning an accident in my car." As early as October 1995, Diana confided in her lawyer, Victor Mishkin, and revealed to him that Charles was planning to kill her by means of an arranged car accident. The notes became known as the Mishkin Note.
Second, serious inconsistencies at the scene of the accident.
Emergency physician Dr. Frederick Malayas happened to be in the vicinity and arrived 2 minutes after the accident at 0:25. However, there was insufficient medical equipment in his emergency ambulance. He called the fire department and directed them to a false accident scene. He later gave many conflicting statements, and when the fire department did arrive, he left the scene of the accident very quickly. The medical ambulance did not arrive until 0:40 a.m. and took 12 minutes to travel 2.3 kilometers. This corresponds to an average speed of about 17 kilometers per hour. The ambulance doctors made inexplicable mistakes. Princess Diana did not arrive at the hospital until 2:06 a.m., about 1.5 hours later. The ambulance strangely did not travel to the nearest hospital and only at an average speed of about 17 kilometers per hour. It inexplicably stopped again for 5 minutes, 500 meters before the finish. Shortly after arriving, Diana died at the hospital. Dr. Michael Bade, chief of forensic pathology at the New York State Police, said, "With this type of injury, time is of the essence. And in the United States, the delay in getting Diana to the hospital would be serious malpractice. There is no excuse for it."
John Morgan has intensively investigated Diana's death and has written the book, The Paris-London Connection. For him, there is only one conclusion. Diana was murdered by a Secret Service operation. This raises the serious question: will a contract killer be crowned king on May 6, 2023?
Let us look now at King Charles III and the pedophile entanglements of the royal family.
First, Charles' friendship with Britain's worst sex offender.
Ex-BBC presenter Jimmy Savile, who died in 2011, was the worst sex offender in the country's history, according to Scotland Yard. Police first investigated him for sexually abusing minors as early as 1961. Later, investigations revealed that over a period of 40 years he had abused at least 500 girls and boys, some as young as 2 years old. The number of unreported cases is likely to be much higher. Peter Watt, director of the UK's Child Protection Agency, the NSPCC, said, "We are dealing with someone who never missed an opportunity to find vulnerable victims and abuse them."
Princess Diana thought Savile was crazy and expressed to a friend that even she could not do anything about the fact that he was very often given access to the royal household. How is it possible that Charles called this child abuser his best friend, maintained a very close relationship with him, and even put him on the list of possible godparents for his son Harry? The Queen topped the incredible scandal by making Savile a Knight of the Crown. In light of repeated interrogations by the police for child abuse, it is completely absurd that Charles, or even the Queen, did not know about his double life. The BBC also covered up Savile's practices and prevented an investigative report from being broadcasted in December of 2011. After the scandal surrounding the former BBC presenter nevertheless later became public, other high-ranking figures, like the ex-Prime Minister Edward Heath and ex-Interior Minister Leon Britton, as if in a domino effect, also came under serious suspicion of child abuse. This suggests that Seville was procuring children for the wealthy celebrities and politicians, possibly including the royal family itself. This would also explain how he was able to finance his dissolute lifestyle.
Despite intensive research, no reports have yet been found to show that King Charles III has condemned Seville's now revealed abhorrent sexual practices and distanced himself from Seville.
He will also become the head of the 56-state Commonwealth of...
Second, Charles III supported the pedophile bishop Peter Ball.
We see that he was close friends with Bishop Peter Ball, who abused teenagers and young men over a 30-year period. When the latter was first accused and arrested in 1992, Charles used his influence to protect him. With Charles' help, he was released, allowing his offenses to continue for many more years. Ball was finally legally convicted of abuse, rape, and torture as recently as 2015. Charles was thus complicit in the abuse victims, as Ball felt untouchable through Charles' intercession and continued the horrific crimes unchecked after 1992. Ball was even the guest of honor at Charles and Camilla's wedding in 2005.
Third, the royal family and Jeffrey Epstein's pedophile ring.
Prince Andrew, Charles' brother, has been linked to the pedophile sex trafficking ring of convicted U.S. sex offender Jeffrey Epstein because of his longtime friendship with the latter. The latter placed minors with celebrities in particular. According to the Daily Mail, Epstein is also said to have referred Virginia Giuffre, a U.S. citizen who was still a minor at the time, to Andrew. They are said to have met on Epstein's pedo island in the Caribbean. Giuffre accuses the prince of having sexually abused her several times. Only by the millions of Charles and the Queen he could buy himself out of the abuse scandal. The alleged suicide of Epstein shortly before a new trial raises many questions. Epstein installed hidden cameras on his properties to record celebrities' crimes with underage girls so he could then blackmail them. Strikingly, the same pattern is evident here as in the Jimmy Savile pedophile ring. Numerous high public figures are clearly deeply entangled in the swamp of pedophilia. This makes them susceptible to blackmail. Under this pressure, they henceforth, by virtue of their high social position, cover up for the sex crime cartels. These provide children for abuse on a grand scale. This also explains why, according to official statistics, thousands of children are reported missing every year and never turn up again. According to research by the British publicist David Icke, many of these children are murdered after being abused so that the high figures are not exposed as perpetrators and the sex crime cartels are also not exposed.
Charles and the royal family maintained the closest of relationships over many years with serious criminals who raped, tortured and abused innocent underage children. The inevitable question that must now be asked is not whether the royals were so naive that they did not even notice, but whether Charles or the royal family were even directly involved in these horrific crimes.
Furthermore, he now has at his disposal more than 300 residents.
Dear viewers, the King Charles III file documents a completely different picture than the mass media present. The mass media convey to millions of TV viewers all over the world the illusion of an illusory royal world through a pompously staged coronation and fade out the reality behind the walls of the magnificent palaces. How is it possible that a man implicated in his wife's killing and a paedophilia sympathizer is to be crowned king, and yet there is no outcry? Therefore, help in any way to make known the shocking background of the top-secret Charles III file. Inform as many of your acquaintances as possible by mail or WhatsApp. Post the video on Facebook or upload parts of this video on TikTok.